Alright, so today I want to review some more emergency LED lights, strobes, traffic notifiers, caution lights, however you like to word yours. Got several different products, one of which is a Nilight notifier for the window that I have not shown before. Has the suction cups, and then you have your pods. And like a lot of their other products, you have this controller, cigarette lighter, has the O-ring connector for connecting the lights. This one came kind of saran wrapped. It was a little odd. Wasn't really any bubble wrap in the packaging, but whatever. They're not damaged. So I'm gonna set the brackets and the suction cups aside. The brackets are nice. Nothing bad to say about any of this stuff, really. Even the adhesive is 3M, so that's nice. Seems like they're really trying to bring a good product. So for the window notifiers here, the body is aluminum. The outside is plastic, but it's covering a drilled and tapped metal insert on each end. This one has a little scratch in there. That's from the factory. The diffusers, whatever they've done here with the LEDs, they're really nice, and you'll see when I demo them, they look like a signal system. If you've ever worked with these kind of lights before, there are some really expensive equipment out there from brands that departments use, like Signal and Whelen. These are nice as far as their actual function, and then of course all the modes are all the good modes they have been bringing, and I'll show those too. This is an odd brand, but it's called DOXMALL. And I would say, the controller's similar, but the quality's a little bit different, maybe a little bit lower with this product, even though it's similarly built. The diffuser is more directional. It feels a little bit cheaper. Similar construction where you have a plastic piece and then you have the aluminum. Now the differentiating thing for me is, hello, this is a interior product. This is out in the elements. Now this isn't for police, it's for like construction, or tow truck would be a really good use case for this, like if you have a rollback or something like that. But I have some issues with this one. One of them is pretty obvious. See how the wires are exposed here? This hole, and I'll zoom in. There's no ingress protection for this. The wires are just kind of crossing in between here. Now, which is a little bit confusing myself. Why would you bring your primary lead into a pod when you have this hole here where you could have used sealant or grommet and ran all the wires through here to each other and the primary wire into the hole? And I'm wondering if maybe that's, how they intended to do it, but then they realized they would have to do extra machining to get wires through here. But then if you look in here, it ain't sealed anyway. Now I did look really close, and in these pods I believe there is an O-ring. It's really hard to see. It's almost worth taking apart and investigating, because if these don't have an O-ring, then they're going to just get all kinds of moisture in there and go bad. Now I do like the design here for the edge ones. Another gripe I have with this, and I'll zoom back out just a little bit, is these feet, man. So this is the thinnest. This is like some thin rubber here, and it comes off fairly easily. I mean, there's nothing to it. If you've ever had, which if you're looking at these products, you may have had something like this before. It's usually a really tough, sometimes even plastic-like rubber foot that's hard to get off on these. And then so I was like, okay, that's one little red flag. The other thing is these things aren't glued in, the magnets. So the way magnetism works is it's how much force is applied depends on the ferrous material on both sides, right? So this is a decent size, almost looking like a galvanized piece of metal, right? So if for some reason the piece of metal that you're connecting it to, which roofs are usually thinner than this, but if it just happened to not be, or there was structure within the unibody and underneath the metal sheeting on your roof, there's a pretty good chance that these would pull off with this and be stuck to your roof, and when you lift this pod off of here. I just really don't like the idea of, you know, you going to use this product and then it scratches the living you know what out of your roof because, you know, the edges aren't that smooth, and then the magnets aren't glued, and then the rubber foot comes off easy. I don't think it'll be as much of a problem as you're careful, but if you're careless, you know, you could easily end up damaging your roof or your paint using this. And, you know, a lot of times these types of lights aren't necessarily just used on service equipment, like the tow truck. Sometimes you're towing a large vehicle and you put something like this on the trunk or on the roof of the vehicle just to get a little bit of extra visibility if you're on the interstate or something. And last thing you want to do is scratch a customer's vehicle, right? If you're towing somebody for a flat and they don't have run flats or something, and then you use this and then it scratches their vehicle, and then you're into all kinds of other issues then. So that's just something that I think is important. You should be aware of. I may even like pull this apart after I demo, because I'm really curious about these lenses and really worried that if they don't have an O-ring, I couldn't possibly recommend this at all to be used on your vehicle. You'd be wasting your money. And then there's these. Now these are from PerfecTech. These are the blue and white ones. I've reviewed some similar to these before, almost an identical setup and everything. I've seen these before from another brand. I'm almost certain they came from the same factory. I'm gonna open this up. They aren't bad. There's some things I like about them. Now, of course, these don't come with wiring harnesses. You know, you got to wire them up yourself. Some kits do or don't have what's called the common wire or the sync wire that would sync them all together. This one has your positive, negative, and your mode light, mode wire. I like that these have manual retention with the screws. These are typically sealed in the rear pretty good. These maybe not quite as good as I'm used to seeing, but it seems okay. Nice little reflectors, or deflectors really is what they are. And I do see a gasket squished in there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hook up a couple of these, give you an idea of how these work. Just got to strip this wire a little bit so you can see two of them. I had taken out one and tested it already. And you know, these wires are relatively thin. They don't need to be thick, but it makes them harder to work with in automotive. You know, whenever you're splicing all this stuff together, you have to be pretty meticulous on what crimp connectors you use. You're probably going to want to invest in something to solder, or a really good crimper that's made for the smaller gauge wires, so that you don't run into issues after you've installed them and after your lights are working half on or whatever the case is. So this is them out of sync. You see they're in two different modes, and then if I, you know, hit the mode wire to the positive, if I can keep the wire connected here. One of the difficult things with just testing these as opposed to installing them. Hook this back up. So these are the mode wires, right? The yellow. If I hit just one of them, you'll see the mode changes on one of them. Now they match up, but they're actually, these are almost synced and unintentionally. Now if I put these together, now that they're on the same mode and basically synced up, which this would be how it would go when you install them. This, you know, you wouldn't power them on until you have them all connected and the yellows all together. So I'll change the mode, and you can see mode changes. And I think that's, you know, I think it's bright enough for what it is. I'll just go through some of the modes real quick. Of course, you're going to have a lot of alternations of wig wag and flashes, and this is probably one of the better ones. It's just a strobe wag. You have your steady burn, wig wag, wigwag that like strobe 2 or 3 times left and right, and then more of an intense strobe. All the basic modes. So that's those, and these were the PerfecTech. Put those aside, and then we'll take a look at these Nilight pods here. These mount inside the window, just a reminder. Go ahead and wire it up, and then turn it on. And this is what I was talking about with these being really nice, the intensity of them. I mean, it looks pretty on par with the expensive stuff. And I'll go ahead and change the modes here. And you know, these are controlled together, and so you know, naturally they're going to alternate, but you can actually change how you alternate them, because usually they're mounted like this in your windows, you know, one on each side. Depending on how you flip them when it's in, let's see, one of the wigwag modes. Let me get back to one of those. You can see there's a lot of modes. So you got, there's a couple wigwags there. So this one's directional, so you probably want to line them up correctly if you decide to use that one, but when you're in a mode like this, you depend on how you mount them, because you can mount them either way. How it looks from the exterior is going to be a little bit different versus, you know. So you can kind of change the pattern a little bit by doing that. So you see left, left, right, right. If you were to flip this, you got inside, outside. So that's those, and these are nice. I mean, it's hard to capture on camera, of course, but these are nice and bright. They work really good. I think those will penetrate tint just fine. Alright, so that's the Nilight. And then here is this other brand, DOXMALL. I'm not familiar with them. First product I've gotten from them. And they seem like they may be like a value option, you know. But they're nice and bright. They do have all the good modes, you know. They do have the side lights. I'm gonna go ahead and change some modes here. I like that. It's kind of alternating 2 different modes. Same with that one. It's kind of chasing left to right and then all strobe and then doing it all over again. This one is a pretty good one too. It's just ping-ponging, like a little mixture of things there. This is a full strobe, left right strobe, a pulsating almost. It's not quite strobing as hard as it was. Another full strobe, different speed, even slower. So one was left to right, the other one was right to left. This one's pretty neat. So this is where they're all on all the time, but then they kind of deactivate certain lights left to right. Back to a standard strobe. Another strobe, but this one's kind of interesting the way it's almost, I think it's alternating left to right. And then steady burn. You can see the steady burn here. And the lights there. And it's plenty bright. All kinds of modes. You know, whatever you like, you can run on here. No complaints there. Now, another thing I'll note, there is no O-ring disconnector here, right? And so people don't think of this kind of stuff, but this could be a big deal for you, because you're thinking you're having to fit this wire through a hole, but guess what? On one end you have this big ass piece of equipment. On the other end you've got this big chunky cigarette lighter thing, right? If there's no disconnect in between, you're not going to be fishing this through a hole. So guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to be splicing this. And what they should have done was what Nilight did, where you have this connector in between that's got an O-ring, and then all you have to do is get a hole about this size, right? Versus this. So another thing they didn't think of. I'm really tempted to just take this apart. I think I'm gonna do that so we can take a look at the see if this thing is even worth looking at to purchase, because if there's no O-ring in here, then I wouldn't waste any time or money, because I can see the PCB pretty clearly through the lenses. And so if there's no O-ring to protect that PCB, then you know, this is not going to be a good thing to buy. So this is laid out exactly the same. We'll go ahead and zoom in, and let's take a look. So you've got the 4, you know, retention screws, which is okay. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out, and let's see if there's an O-ring. Now, if you're really pinching the dollar, there's nothing to say if you're not a handy kind of person. I am. I'm comfortable taking things apart and working with electronics and stuff. You know, if you're pretty handy, you can just take these apart and seal them with your own, you know, go-to brand of silicone, or even use some CA glue if you wanted. But yeah, no O-ring, right? No O-ring. PCB isn't fixed. It's just slotted in place. These wires ain't gonna handle any amount of stress. There's no glue on the wires. But yeah, all you have is this little ledge just to try to keep moisture out, and it's not gonna work, because the way these work is the temperatures fluctuate quite a bit. The whole chassis is black, right? It's gonna raise in temperature, and then dew's gonna set in the afternoon, and then all this air that's trapped in here, the temperature differential is just gonna cause condensation to form. And so these are going to get little water droplets in them, and then you're going to be really upset because they're going to look really bad. They're going to look glazed over, and then eventually they'll just stop working because they'll corrode and everything else. I mean, you've got exposed PCB in here and copper. They did a good job with selecting the LEDs, no issue there, but really this should have, you know, been more thought over. I mean, even the hole back here, right? Let's not forget about the hole. Even if this works, if you're driving down the road towing a vehicle or whatever, the water's going to get in here, you know. So no, I would not recommend this product at all. I might even put a note in the description beside the information for it, just to let the general public just know to stay away from that one. The other two are perfectly fine. Nilight's a pretty good brand. If you're looking for something to outfit some vehicles and you want to save some money, you only need a regular mechanic that knows how to do 12-volt wiring. You don't have to have any special electronics person to wire this stuff for you. Just apply all the same principles of using the correct gauge wires and fasteners and inline fuse, and do whatever you want to do there. You can even take these apart, and you can extend these momentary switches somewhere else, right? You don't have to use a cigarette lighter, because it's just a 12-volt circuit inside here. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and take this apart so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's your fuse, right? Here's your nipple. This is for your cigarette lighter socket. This is the retainer. It's part of what retains the mechanical, you know, separation of this. And then we'll go ahead and take this apart, and I'll show you what's inside here. There's going to be a couple leaf springs for the negative connection, and then you're going to have your leads. Here you go. See, very simple, right? So these have spade connectors. You can actually cut these, and you can clean up these spades and reuse this and put it in a standard double-sized toggle, you know, mold on your dash. And then of course here's your positive and your negative wire. There's really nothing overly complicated to these. The circuitry on a lot of these products are either inline or it's in the light. A lot of times the PCB of the light will have the logic, and so you don't actually have to worry about if you're going to do some little bit of MacGyvering or whatever, not being able to make it work, because more than likely it's just going to be something simple like this. So yeah, that's been my review of these lighting products. Hopefully this helps somebody when they're making decisions or wondering what they're getting in, if they're going to purchase something and waste money because it's just not going to work. So we got 2 goes and 1 no-go. Of course, Nilight's always good, so that's a go. And then the no-goes being, or the no-go being the Owl brand thing there. And then, you know, these are okay. Alrighty.